This is Matt from Rancor. I'm CEO and co-founder of Rancor, and with me is Waldek.
Hi everybody, my name is Waldek Mastykarz. I am head of product at Rancor. And together today we will talk about journey that we had at Rancor, moving from Slack and Zoom and 20 million other things to Teams. So was it worth the effort for us, and what drove us? You could say away or towards Teams.
Yeah, so the way that we have planned this session is more a conversation also between Waldek and me. I'm looking at it more from the point of view of running a company and what led us to where we have been and what made us to make the decision to move to Teams. And Waldek is more looking from his personal point of view as an end user, as a techie, I don't know what other role you are having, right, Rolling?
The receiving end of it.
The receiving end of it. Okay. All right. So let's start off, first of all, to thank all of our sponsors. And somehow this went too fast. I one click and the whole slide. Thank all of our sponsors as usual. What's going on here? These events usually are not possible with sponsors. So all those fine folks here who help Russ to organize all that, and please stop by their websites, drop them a note, say Russ is awesome and the event was fantastic, so that he gets some more sponsors the next time as well. All right, I don't know what's wrong with that slide. It somehow goes one too far. So first of all, I want to talk about briefly to give you a little bit of an understanding who we are. If you haven't heard of Rancor, so we are a B2B software vendor focusing on governance and code analysis around M365. So we are a software company building software for others, usually organizations that use SharePoint, Office 365, and all the other tools and services combined around it. We started off as a remote company entirely and moved throughout the time to a partially remote and partially on-site company. So we have one main office in Munich, and we have people in multiple time zones. So we have people in the US, we have people in Europe in different time zones. We're located in, I think, at least 10 different countries, or maybe 8-9 different countries. I don't know exactly by heart. So about 60% of our team are remote workers, and the rest is sitting in the office. Well, at the moment, everybody is a remote worker, as probably most of you who are listening as well. We also have some external suppliers who collaborate with us, mostly in development, but also marketing and sales. So helping us to succeed and move things forward, but they are not part of the organization and need to communicate with us regularly. We collaborate mostly, well, surprise, surprise, on documents, on tasks, and as a software vendor on code. So we discuss code, how to build it, how it works, and so on, or why it does not work. I don't know if that ever happens for Waldek.
Never.
Never. So our communication is both, it's asynchronous mostly. So we use a lot of chat. We write something, somebody else is in a different time zone and picks it up whenever they are available. And we do a lot of video calls and have been doing that since the early days. So we're at the moment almost 7 years old as a company, just to give you a little bit of a feeling. We don't have an intranet. We don't have any internal newsletters or how we push out communication to people. And usually our company updates are via video call. So we usually have a scheduled call where leadership informs the rest of the team about what has happened, what's planned, where are things changing, which decisions have been made, and so on. So this is all very much help. We are trying to force us to see each other. So usually video is always on when we do a call. These are very rare occasions when we don't have video on. So you always have to wear at least a nice shirt.
Not really.
What else wear? Well, You never know. All right. So just to give you a little bit of an understanding, what kind of challenges we face and where we are. So we have some collaboration needs. First of all, well, we need to access information anytime, any place. Because people are in different places and sometimes also on the road. They are in different time zones and so on. We both communicate asynchronously, but also formally. We want to support our workforce efficiently so that we are not wasting time in miscommunication, lack of communication, lack of information flowing to the right people. We need to properly hand off over time zones. Yeah, and we want to document as many things as possible to simplify onboarding also of new members, where we are, where we stand, so that you can do things self-service. Waldek, maybe you want to add some points from your view. Do you have anything to add there?
Absolutely. So if you think about actually as a company, we have these two, you could think of it like two streams. Like one is the product side where we build product, we spec product, we research that and all that. And then there's supporting side, which consists of everything else, which is sales, marketing, HR, and so forth and so on. Right. So on the product side, there are these two streams, you could say. Like one is we do a research, we come up with an idea. So we need to formalize the research, taking notes of that, collaborate, think through it, and so forth and so on. Then we, for example, come up with a spec. And that's something that on one hand you brainstorm. So you think about like, what are the different ways we could approach a problem that we seen in the market. But then also, like, once you come up with an idea, you need to organize it, because otherwise, if you would just do it over a call where you're presenting your idea to someone and then you expect a reaction, like immediate reaction, no, you have to give others the room to think about it, digest whatever you said, and so forth and so on. So you need to formalize.
Sorry about this. Something is really weird with my mouse today.
you need to basically have a way to formalize your thoughts, put them down, and share them with others where they can again in their turn react, respond, and so forth and so on. So that is the one side, which is more asynchronous, right? And then the other thing is like basically the same way you would have it in the office. Like there's one dev working on something and they're stuck, and they basically need another pair of eyes, and they need it immediately now, because otherwise, like if they will post something, they will be stuck for another few hours, right? So ideally they need instant help, basically another pair of eyes to look at their code, walk with them. And that is the synchronous part where we turn on videos, cameras, screen sharing, and so forth and so on, basically to try to mimic this experience of being next to each other and basically go together through a piece of code that we can both together look at, debug, write, adjust, and so forth, and so on. So on both ends, both supporting end and the product end, I think that these two differences that we need to marry, which is the asynchronous thing where you need to give people time to think things through, and then add another on another side this synchronous thing, like let's talk now, let's take the time because there is something that I need to bounce off someone now, or we need to look at this together now.
Thank you. One thing that I also wanted to add more from an organizational perspective, one of the biggest challenges in a remote workforce that probably many of you are currently experiencing during that crisis is that it's also very hard to basically just step over to the desk of the other person and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, do you have time for a quick chat? I want to ask you something, or just to do the casual water cooler talk. So what we have done there is, in order to also give people, especially these people who are remote, the ability to also do casual conversations. We do, for example, regular coffee calls where people just join in and see each other, talk with people who they might usually not talk to. And so video is extremely important for us in order to keep us also in touch with each other, not just for formal meetings. And that is definitely one of the important requirements that we have for our organization.
And I guess maybe to add to that, because I've seen remarks about it that in a way surprised me, but on the other hand, it just proves the reality in which we are, that might not apply to everybody else. Like I've seen comments that people might not feel they're ready to turn video on because they don't wear makeup or they are not clothed as they were in the office. But I guess on the other hand, like for us, that's never an issue, but maybe that is a part of the culture that we have that is very informal internally, at least. Like we don't wear suits to work, and there's like being in a t-shirt or a hoodie is just the normal thing, and it's never this boundary that you would say, well, because I don't have my hair done, I wouldn't enable a video. Like no, like that is maybe it's even more important to bring your whole self to work, even maybe on your at hair day, and see each other, as opposed to say, you know what, I will turn video off because I don't feel well, right? So for us, that's never been an issue. Like it's video on is you could say by default.
I think this is the first time today that I'm wearing a dress shirt at home for since 7 years or so. So, so just for everyone here.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Matt, for doing that for us.
Yeah, I really stepped up here. All right. So how did all of that happen at the end? We basically grew, and every time when we had a need, we looked into what can help us with a specific need, and how does it fit into the entire infrastructure. And basically it resulted in a zoo of tools that we had. So of course we had Slack, so that was one of our major communication tools, chat, because at the time when we started using Slack didn't have any video calling features, so we also started using Zoom. And while at the time was also a very cheap alternative, one-on-one calls were free, unlimited, and calls with more than 2 people were, I think, limited to 40 minutes or free.
Correct.
So
Yep.
that also helped to keep meetings short, because we didn't want to pay for Zoom at the time. Right, it had a good enough integration in Slack, so you could just basically type /Zoom and then it would start a Zoom call for you. So that was quite convenient, easy to adopt. Then we used Trello as a planning tool for everything that is not product related, so not work items, tasks, and so on. So tasks in marketing, tasks in sales, ideation, and so on. We use Trello for that. And then we also used Office 365, of course. We used Outlook, SharePoint mostly as file storage. So we never had a file server or anything like that. We always had SharePoint Online for that, and OneDrive. And but we didn't really use SharePoint as an intranet or build anything on top of it, or I don't know, stored lists, custom lists on SharePoint. It was just document library and files in a folder structure. So that was on the collaboration side. On the operational side, we have Azure DevOps, or at the time, Visual Studio Team Services, basically keeping our code or storing our code and builds and work items and stuff like that around. And everything else in operations was centralized in HubSpot. So we use HubSpot CRM for sales, for writing quotes, for communicating with customers. We use HubSpot Marketing for all regarding mailings and automation, drip campaigns, and things like that, if you know what I'm talking about. And then we use HubSpot Service Hub for support. So for support tickets, conversations, chats with customers, and so on. So that was also separated a while back, but we consolidated that already before to a single tool. And And then we used a bunch of automations. So we used if this then that, and we used Zapier to get data from one place to another, to automate certain things. For example, we have also an HR tool that provides a calendar, and we used Zapier to push birthdays of that HR tool into Slack. So there was a birthday reminder automated into Slack. We built a bunch of custom tools for ourselves, for our processes where we didn't find anything. We had loads of integrations into Slack, so integrations from other systems, integrations from our website, integrations between channels, and so on. So, many of them also custom built. So all of that was basically interconnected. It just grew basically. I think that was what you say, what you call sprawl, right?
Exactly. So, and the one thing that I'm interested in was, so if you look at all these tools, where would you say that you personally spend majority of your time?
Me?
Yeah.
I would say at the time, probably mostly in Slack. Yeah, most of my time was in Slack because, well, my role as the CEO of the company is mostly coordinating things with other employees in the company, so discussing things, deciding things, that was mostly done via chat or via Zoom. So these were the most, and for external communication, most of it was via email, so Outlook.
Yeah, cool.
And yourself?
I think very much the same, right? So for a big part, Slack, because it was just the very easy thing to talk about things when you didn't need a video for video things, calls. And then code, right? So Azure DevOps, Visual Studio, and so on and so on, like the code side of things. But that was very much it. Like things like, I think like there was like it went like few months in after I joined, only when I received my first email, I was like, I wasn't used to not having email.
Yeah, that was quite different. Yeah, we used it also very extensively at the time. Of course, our behavior has also changed to the needs that have changed over time. Anyway, just to give you a little bit of a feeling, facts and figures. So as a company with about 20 to 30 people collaborating, so the amount of externals is varying, of course, where we did to. We had over 100 channels. We had over 70 SharePoint sites. I don't know how that happened, but like 20 employees, 70 SharePoint sites, 35 Trello boards, over 100 integrations. And integrations could be an email integration, could be a webhook, could be Twitter, Zapier, whatever. We built loads of custom webhooks from HubSpot, from Zoom webinar, from whatever. And in total, I was shocked myself a little bit when I looked that up. In total, we used at the time probably over 100 different tools and systems and services within our organization. So it's amazing how quickly these things grow. But what startled me always in Slack, you get, I think every month you get a status or a stats email where they tell you, okay, the last month your organization communicate that in that way and so on. And roughly always the communication was by 90% not in channels, but in one-to-one and one-to or many-to-many chats. So despite having a lot of channels, as you saw, over 100 channels, the channels were very little utilized. I don't know if you can share that experience from your point of view, Waldek.
Absolutely. And well, so it's like, it's this two-edged sword, right? On one hand, when you share something, you don't want to make that upfront decision for whom it will be relevant, right? So you want to share it to a, let's say, relevant audience, meaning a channel, because channels are assigned to groups, right? So whether it's applicable to everybody or only the dev team or product team or sales marketing. But then on the other hand, it's very convenient to say, I just want to ask this one thing to that person, and then that at some point evolves to 1 to 3, 1 to 4 discussion, then you involve more folks, and then it's always like, why haven't we put it in channel in first place? right? So there is this thing where sometimes you have just one idea, but then something comes back, and then that one thread evolves to a full discussion that involves in the end everybody.
Yeah. So yeah, just some figures. So why did we actually move to Teams? Maybe one short anecdote about that. When Teams got launched by Microsoft in the very early days, I think about 3 or 5 months after they launched it, we were thinking about moving to Teams. So we tried it out for a month. We did an experiment. Okay, I basically.
Right.
Do you recall? We were at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the time, I think we were not that many. We were maybe 10, 12 people or so. And I did really a hard cut. But basically, I said, okay, from tomorrow on, we are on Teams, and I shut off access to Slack, and everybody needed to go to Teams. And we really had to force ourselves through 1 month using Teams. And when we moved back to Slack, so we decided then, for various reasons, it wasn't ready at the time. I'm not going into that. But when we moved back, it was like you could hear everyone exhale and like, oh, finally. I'm back.
The month is over.
The month is over.
Yeah, we hated it originally. Yeah, absolutely.
We really hated it. It took us another 3 years to reconsider it again. Why did we actually move? Well, one of the big things was costs, of course. We have Office 365 E3 already with all the bells and whistles around it, which has basically everything that we want. And we paid for Slack, we paid for Zoom, and we paid for Trello on top of it. So it was a pure economic consideration there. Well, why are we paying twice for the same functionality, more or less the same, and not just do everything in Office 365? So that's an easy one, I guess, to think about that. Yeah, simplicity and security in operations. Well, first of all, the bigger we grow, the more we need to operate the systems, and having to set up an account in Slack, in Zoom, in Trello, in Office 365, and 10 other systems. And if somebody leaves the company or an Excel is no longer working with us, turning everything off, that is kind of cumbersome on the one hand, and it also leaves possibility for doing mistakes, leaving an account still running. So less systems in general, of course, means better ability to secure it and simpler management. General, the whole centralized user management, of course, single sign-on. You can get that with Slack. You can get the full enterprise tier with Slack, which we were not willing to pay just to get single sign-on, because we were happy with the features in the standard plan of Slack. So what it meant that everybody had a different account with a different password in Slack and in Zoom and in Office 365 and in Trello. So cumbersome also to manage. Centralized file storage. As I said before, we stored our documents in SharePoint and OneDrive. But if you want to collaborate with somebody in Slack, then you just drop that file into Slack, and suddenly there is another copy in Slack, which is then living on there. And maybe somebody picks up the copy from Slack instead of the more recent copy in SharePoint. So that complicated things the more we collaborated on documents. Then, of course, the whole data sovereignty topic is also a security topic, of course, but having so many systems spread out all over the world, well, we all have heard maybe around the security concerns of Zoom in the recent days, routing video traffic through China despite not having any participants in China and things like that. Yeah, that was an issue. The customers that we have are large enterprises, also governmental organizations, and we also needed to make sure that we know where things are and where they are in control. Data compliance, GDPR. In America, I think you have only something similar in California, but the GDPR, the data privacy regulation in European countries. Got I think it went live last year, right? Or was it 2 years ago already?
Yeah, 2 years ago, I think. Yeah,
2 years ago already, and it was a big scare. Fear mongering going around there. Okay, people could sue you like crazy if you suddenly leak a piece of data and so on. So we decided, okay, having everything in one data center, centralized, managed by Microsoft, GDPR compliant, also compliant to the even stronger German data privacy rules and so on. That was important for us also to communicate data to our customers. Yeah, and then, well, at the end, we are a Microsoft partner. We are a gold content and collaboration partner. We have multiple Microsoft MVPs. I myself am an Office servers and services MVP where Teams belongs to. So it was kind of weird also that we're actually not using Teams, right? So that, what do you think, Waldek?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, like back in the days, we would start with Slack where there was no Teams, right? So there was no alternative for us back then. But at some point, yes, Teams arrived and we tried it, and then we decided against it because it just felt awkward at the times going from Slack over to Teams. But yes, like externally, especially talking to Microsoft, it was like kind of this weird impression that like, why aren't you on Teams? And then when you try to explain it, and it's like, it's just like it didn't make a good impression.
Yeah, it doesn't add up. Yeah, true. And on the other hand, for example, our sales team, despite being on Slack, used already Teams to communicate with customers and with Microsoft. So somehow we had the shadow chat tool Teams, which wasn't disabled, where sales primarily was already actively using it. They used Skype for Business before, but once that moved over, Teams was just more natural for them.
Well, so, and also on the other hand, like me myself, I'm doing some work for PMP at Microsoft, and for that we're also on Teams already, right? Because that is again a Microsoft-driven group, right? So again, like for that, yes, we use Shadow IT Teams to communicate with Microsoft.
Yeah, well, and then of course our products also support Microsoft Teams. So in order to eat our own dog food, of course, we should also actually actively use the products of Microsoft to see if our products are working properly. So that was these were the main reasons. It was the main the reason that was not the reason to move away from Slack, that we were somehow not satisfied with Slack. Slack actually provided everything that we needed. Right?
Yeah, exactly, right. So in a way, you could think, well, it's weird, right? Because like all of these are non-functional requirements for which we move, but to be honest, like we haven't really like looking at our needs, right? Communicate synchronously and or both synchronously and asynchronously, be able to reach each other quickly, have things in writing as well. Like we didn't really. Like all of that was already available to us for free in Slack, right? So that is why we never really looked into a reason for a change, because there was no functional thing that we would miss really in Slack that would really push us hard towards Teams.
This morning, I told the team, we had one of our weekly team calls. I told the team that Waldek and I are going to have a session tonight around moving from Slack to Teams, and you could hear people in the call like, "Oh,
Slack again."
Slack,
yeah.
I want to go back." So it's fun. It was fun, kind of, because okay, for some people it works better, and of course we got also accustomed over many years to using it. And but we will come to that in a little bit later, what we actually love and don't love so much about our move. All right, so just a brief summary. How did we move? We moved manually, so we didn't massively use any third-party tools. We didn't move conversations, for example, from Slack. We just left that behind. We still have our Slack account, so if somebody needs to look something up, can still enable the person in Slack, and they can look things up, but it was never necessary actually. How did we move? We started with leadership. So we did a test run with our leadership, and we thought like, okay, that's probably the best way to start, because if leadership doesn't buy it and is ranting about that stupid tool to their team, if we start at the bottom, then nobody will like it. So we did basically a test run with our leadership team, moved us over, and looked at, okay, where do we see the deficits? Can we do something about that? And are we willing to move over with the rest of the company? We set up teams for departments. So basically, we have a marketing team, a sales team, a product team, a dev team, a business operations team. I think, what else do we have? I think that's a couple of more, but basically more like, yeah, department-oriented structure. We currently don't have project-focused teams, I believe, or at least none that I'm aware of. Maybe I'm just not a member of them. It could also be, but I don't know. And as we had so many SharePoint sites, over 70, we consolidated all that data. So we basically created those teams, and we looked, for example, business operations is basically managing for us finance, HR, any type of legal issues, and so on. And these were 3 different SharePoint sites. So we moved all these documents into that team site, or that site. That is, how do you call that? Is that a team site behind a team?
Team site?
A team site. I don't know. I don't know if you call it team site, or is it a group?
No. So the thing is a site, right? You move files to a site.
It's a normal SharePoint site, but it's not a communication site, so it must be a team site, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Microsoft with their naming policy. All right. So we moved Trello boards to Planner, and we actually used the tool for that. There are plenty of out there, so I'm not recommending anyone. We used one that was good enough for our needs, and didn't cost much, a couple of $100, and that helped us to basically move also the history and all the open cards to the new planner plans, and we consolidated those as well a bit because we had also too many Trello boards. And then we moved business units one by one, or departments one by one. So we started off with sales because sales was already accustomed to teams. It was an easy win, basically. Then we moved over, I think, development, then marketing and so on. Didn't really matter, but we just moved over. And then the majority was over and the rest just was pulled over because nothing happened anymore in Slack. Slack was basically dying out. So that forced people to move over. I think over the course of a month, we had both running at the same time, and then we shut down Slack. And then we did a massive review of all these integrations that we had in Slack. Checked if we still need them. It was shocking sometimes what kind of integrations were there, especially because in Slack, basically anyone can do that. I think you can limit that also, but we didn't have that limitation at the time. So anyone could add an integration, and there were like crazy things there. So so we cleaned that all up and put controls over that. Yeah, and then we did a lot of training of our team. We are a mixture of very technical people who are, keen on trying out new things, but also very, very non-technical people that are kind of, scared of the change. Waldek, what do you think?
Oh yeah, and that's so. I see exactly the same, right? So as you said, there are a few of us MVPs, and by default, we are folks who love to try things out, experiment with things. And the moment you say let's try teams, well, before the launch, you have 10 teams created, and you're like, no, I didn't mean that, right? And by the time you're back, there's like channels, there's teams, there's extensions, and basically chaos. Basically coming from people being eager to try out things. And then there's other group who says like, no, like don't move my cheese, I'm used to this. Like, this is sufficient for me to work. I'm comfortable doing this. Like, this is not my core task to spend time in Slack. Like, people work with, let's say, I don't know, they work with Adobe or they work in code. Like, they don't really, it doesn't matter to them which tool it is, but if they have something, if they know their way around it, basically it's a change that they hate because they don't see purpose of it, because at the end of the day they would be doing the same, but then in another place with a different tool, different UI, things are in a different place, and then have to relearn all the different things. But to what end, right?
Mm. Yeah, I think some people still haven't learned to like Teams, I guess.
Well, it grows on you, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it
it
takes
does.
time.
It does, yeah. All right, so where are we now? Well, basically, Teams is more or less the central hub now. So everything circles around it. We do instant messaging, we do video calling, of course. We have our documents there. That's also one of the challenges that we face. I will get into that in a moment with documents. We have Planner, which we integrate in tabs in Teams. We do also in-team channels recurring meetings, which is something that I personally like quite a lot because it's everybody sees, hey, there's a call going on, I can join. For example, our coffee calls in Slack, it was often that people missed it because you didn't know that a call was going on. It was just a link to Zoom. Oh, there's a call. Somebody launched it. And in Teams, you'll see, okay, there's an ongoing call. You get a notification and so on. External communications, I think that is a massive win for us. Both to Microsoft, for example, makes so much of a difference if you send an email to somebody and hope for a response in whatever time frame, or if you see somebody being present and available and you chat directly to him and you get immediately a response because you know, hey, this person is sitting at the desk right now. So presence indication over organizations is extremely valuable, and we use the same for customers. So when we have customers relations, using a phone calling a customer, this is basically that technology nowadays, especially when calling people in the US. Getting somebody on the line via phone as a salesperson, for example, is near to impossible. And I think everyone who's listening in here could probably relate. If the number on your phone is already smelling like something that you don't know, then you expect sales and you better not pick up. But sometimes you actually want to communicate, and with Teams you can just say, hey, should we have a quick chat about that? Sure, let's have a call. And then you have the Teams call. So much more natural and easier and less intrusive, in my opinion. Yeah, we still have integrations from other systems. So, for example, we integrated things that are happening in HubSpot. So if a campaign is sent out or statistics from our website are pushed weekly into Teams. So because not everyone has access to every system, but it might be valuable information. Hey, a campaign is currently running very well, or a webinar has currently a couple of hundred signed up registrants, and so on. So we use a lot Power Automate for that, to get these things in. We still have our birthday reminder, so Power Automate is now pulling the information out of our HR system and pushing the birthday notification into a Teams channel. But we don't use any bots, or at least not that I'm aware of that anyone is using a bot. And we also don't use any apps like third-party apps on it. Or am I wrong, Waldek?
No, you're right, and I guess that maybe for a part that's because where we are with the adoption of Teams. Like, and when you talk to customers, like, you often hear, well, at times it feels like that adoption of Teams is going differently than, for example, intranet in SharePoint, right? Because there you give people a site, and somehow they know instantly how to customize it, how to add a web part, how to add a piece of script, how to show the weather, the stock, and whatnot. This is not the case in Teams. In Teams, it seems to be like the road towards customizing it is longer, but I think it's going to be inevitable also for us that once we get to the point where we're confident about using it, working with it, then we will start adding more and more things, because only then it will click. It will basically click like, hey, we can do this, we can do that. Like, why doing this by going to here, there, there, and there, and there, as opposed to having a bot that can automate things, right? So I think it's just a matter of time. Like, we are now on Teams for what, like a year, roughly?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it will still take maybe a while for us to like really make it our own, and then you will see probably the spike, us doing or wanting to do more, which then you or somebody else will need to approve, saying like, we're okay with that or not.
Yeah, that is definitely also one of the takeaways that we had. This Wild West that we had in Slack, we didn't want to have that in Teams anymore. And maybe that was also a good side of doing the switch from one technology to another, because you could just leave all that stuff behind and could say, yes, sorry, not possible anymore. So yeah, but this is where we are now. So just to compare those facts and figures, well, we have now about 40 channels instead of 100. We have 10 teams in total, so not that many, but well, for 20 employees, that's still a lot, I guess. We reduced massively the amount of SharePoint size. We have reduced our planner plans. Our integrations also quite reduced quite a bit. Our tool zoo is still a tool zoo, but a little bit smaller one. But one funny takeaway and that we have is that basically the way we communicate hasn't changed by the tool. So the tool is basically irrelevant. It didn't change our culture of doing a lot of one-to-one and many-to-many chats. So despite being on Teams and having teams and channels, the majority of our communication is actually not happening in teams and channels. It's happening in group chats. And I don't know yet if I feel good or bad about that. So we use the Teams channels mostly on the one hand for casual conversations, so which is not targeted, like somebody is having a funny meme or whatever, or and for like directed communication where we have a decision, everybody here in this group should know. We have accomplished something, okay, everybody should be informed about it. So it's more like, yeah, well, we also do some discussions there, but I think most of them are still happening in smaller groups, right? Waldek?
Yeah, I think for a big part, it's exactly as you said, like for a big part, it's our announcements board.
Yeah.
Yeah, because and if I look, for example, at the tech side of company, like oftentimes we work in code, and when you work in code, you focus on your work and you don't have Teams enabled. Maybe you have them on different screen, minimized, so you don't hear that. And so really the only way to get somebody's attention if you need someone's help immediately is to basically give them virtual pat on the back, meaning call them. And at some point, like if they're really annoyed by you or they're away, they will not pick up. But if they are, they will. But other than that, discussions happen exactly as you say. You could say in the virtual square that we have. But then other than that, we still very much default to one-to-one, one-to-n, but it's in chats and not in the formalized place that we get assigned.
And I believe also the way Teams is structured, it's not really encouraging people to do these things in teams or Teams channels, because in Slack, basically, it was all just a list. You saw your channels and your conversations and so on. They were kind of equal, like, okay, they were still separated. The chats were at the lower end and the channels were at the upper end. But at the end, it was the same behavior. In Teams, the chats are hidden underneath the chat symbol. And if you want to switch over to Teams, you have to switch to the Teams page, basically, to see all your teams and channels there. And although the activity feed is also highlighting both things, people are struggling with the activity feed and the notifications, and things are missed. So it does not encourage people to move conversations over to Teams.
Yeah, and another thing might have to do with the cognitive load, right? That if I want to ask you about something, do I post it in which team, which channel, or I just ask you directly, right? So that might be also easier choice to park it correctly as opposed to make the wrong choice, right?
True. All right. So let's sum it up a little bit.
There are some things that we love.
Yeah, there are some. Oh, despite being critical about many things, we actually like being on Teams. At least most of us, I guess.
Some of us more than others, yes.
Some of us more than others. Yeah, that's true. So I mentioned that already, chatting with external users. Also, the whole ease of seeing the availability of someone, and not only in Teams, but also when I'm in Outlook and I add the email of Waldek into the recipient field, I see immediately the presence indicator. And when I do the same with Russ, who is in total different organization, I see also if he's available, and that might lead to that I actually close that email window and just chat with him directly, because I see, oh, he's present, he's available right now. Why not just chat with him instead of writing an email? So this has been a massive time saver, in my opinion, especially in external communications. And you also immediately know who is already on Teams. That's also funny, because as soon as you have the email address of somebody, put it in Outlook, and it shows a presence, then you know, okay, these guys are on Teams. Let's look them up there. So if that is, well, that is controlled, of course, by the organization, if they allow others to chat with you and if they allow to show the presence, but most of the organizations apparently do. So at least I haven't seen that many that don't. Yeah, I mentioned exactly that right now. Yeah, what I also like previously with Zoom and Slack, we still did call recording. So for example, these announcement calls and then the team calls that we do, we record those so that people who are on vacation or who couldn't make it for whatever reason can at least get an update, because we are not writing a newsletter that sums everything up. So in Zoom, we either had to record locally, upload that recording to SharePoint, share the link to SharePoint, which was cumbersome, or we record it in the cloud. So Zoom Pro paid license allows you to record in the cloud, I think up to 10 gigabyte. And this is where the problem is. It starts recording and recording, and suddenly you hit that limit, and then you need to purge your recording. So again, you have to either download or and upload them into SharePoint, and nobody has the link anymore, or you just say, okay, I don't care about those recordings anymore. In Teams, this is very convenient. You just hit record. It's automatically post-processed by Microsoft Stream. And once the recording is ready, it's pushed into the thread, or it's pushed into the conversation of that meeting, so you can have that access. And it sends you even an email, okay, the recording is now available to every participant. And you can share the recording afterwards to people in your organization and things like that. So I find that extremely valuable from my point of view. Yep. Yeah, files and conversations stay together, so we don't have the files in two places, the same file like we had in Slack. I think that's it. There is nothing more, right? No. I don't know. My mouse is no longer moving forward. This is weird.
Right? No.
No, there's actually more. Don't
yeah,
ask me
we love
why.
more things.
You probably don't see my screen anymore right now.
No.
One moment. I need to reshare my screen. This was weird. One moment. Sorry about that. Waldek, tell something until I've figured out what's going on.
Also, the interesting was what you've just shared about the points that we love. If I think about somebody who just lives in Slack and doesn't do meetings, doesn't do recording, they don't live in files that they share over Slack, they don't look at presence outside of Slack. Like none of these things are important. So I can totally imagine like why there is a lesser or less benefit for them to move from Slack to Teams because they don't use any of these additional options that you have available in Teams for free, and for them it's just a change, right? They move from a tool that they use being Slack to something new being Teams that looks differently, feels differently, works differently, uses different shortcuts and so forth and so on. And as such, like yeah, they only see it as hurdle because they don't see the benefit of all these extra things that are already an integral part of Teams, but which they do not really use.
I think you see my screen again, right?
Yes, one tool to rule them all.
Yeah, so let's speed up a little bit. We have about 9 minutes to go, and I think Russ is getting already a little bit.
We are 1 minute over.
I think we have 5 minutes left in the session.
All right, yeah,
the session itself is going to end.
Don't worry, we are done almost. So tabs, we use tabs a lot to integrate files or to integrate planner plans and so on. And basically, what I love about it is one tool to rule them all. Oh yeah, and the good thing is are these out of office messages. You can set your a message. Okay, I'm currently not available, even if you're not out of office. And everybody who tries to contact you, you immediately see a notification. Hey, this guy is currently not available, and that is also possible to set that automatically through the Outlook calendar. So this is something that I really appreciate myself because it keeps everyone informed. Am I available or not? Yeah, we miss calls. You see where you see everyone. This is really, really painful. Only having 4 videos, but Microsoft is working to ramp that up to 9. I think that's the next big step. 9 video calls.
Yeah.
We had video calls with 30 people in Zoom. And we really loved it because you see the interaction with everyone. Not everybody might understand that, but we like that. Emoji reactions. Yeah, it sounds weird, but in Slack you can. At every message, you can say thumbs up or custom emojis or whatever. We had an emoji for every employee with a photo of the employee, where you could just take off. I'm taking this this task up or whatever, and everybody knew immediately. Oh, this was Waldek because there's the image of Waldek on it and so on. So that I think
it's gone.
a lot of people miss that one. Some integrations. Yeah. HubSpot has a really good Slack integration, and basically in Teams it's non-existent. Sharing code, Waldek.
Exactly right. So in Slack you have this rich experience where you can really easily share a bunch of code. You can even choose a language in which it is, right? So it will it like in Teams it's only block of text which you can show as code, but it's not near as rich and it's simple to use as it is in Slack, right? So for devs among us, like all regarding discussing code, sharing code in Teams, that is definitely a step back.
Yeah. So for the sake of time, I'm going through it a little bit quicker.
Well, let me just interrupt one thing real quick. Is this session is going to end for everybody. The connection information for our next session is on the Modern Workplace Summit's website under sessions. All the connection information is out there. If you haven't received it, that's where to go to get it. Okay, Matt, back to you.
All right. I'm just picking out some. You can read this on the slide yourself, but what I miss is proper functioning notifications. Notifications in Teams are just a mess, so I turned them off entirely because it's confusing me. The threads, some people still don't get, instead of creating a new thread to respond to a thread. So the UI is still very, very painful. For some, it's in general the tidiness of Slack having very condensed conversations. Teams is wasting space everywhere. Basically, you could have that way more optimized. So that is definitely something that I miss from Slack. And I used a lot the reminders. So in Slack, you can go on every message and say, remind me in 3 days, remind me in an hour. And you get another notification in an hour for the same message. Or you could also write /remind me tomorrow, or remind Waldek tomorrow to send me that file. And then he will get a notification. And that was really convenient that I was missing a lot. Yeah. So learnings, I'll put them all up on the slide. Waldek, do you want to go through that one?
Sure. So basically coming from you, right? Because we learned that like we have this very upfront text heavy crew who likes to fiddle with stuff. We need to lock things down in order to avoid sprawl, at least to the point where we can, right? So not allow everybody to create teams. Teams are departments. We have them formalized, so there's no need for everybody to create teams channels. That is up to teams owners, but teams are very much locked, right? And we also seen that non-tech folks were, for some reason, they were more easily accustomed with Slack than they are with Teams. We still don't quite know yet.